Have you ever stood inside an ancient structure and felt the air hum around you, where a single word, barely whispered, seems to linger and grow, filling the space like a living thing? This isn't just a trick of the ear, it's the work of masters, thousands of years ago, long before modern science gave us the tools to measure sound waves. Ancient architects were already engineering spaces with breathtaking precision. They designed temples, tombs, and monuments where acoustics weren't just an afterthought, they were the very heart of the experience. Imagine walking into a chamber where your voice suddenly takes on a supernatural quality, or where a chant rises and falls in perfect harmony, as if the walls themselves are singing back to you. These moments weren't accidents. They were carefully crafted to awe, to intimidate, even to manipulate. Think about the power of sound, how a sudden noise can make your heart race, or how a melody can bring tears to your eyes. Now picture an entire civilization wielding that power on a grand scale. From the echoing passageways of Egyptian pyramids to the whispering galleries hidden within Mayan pyramids, sound was a hidden language. It could make a priest's voice sound like the words of a god. It could turn a crowd's murmur into a thunderous roar. It could make the very air feel alive with something beyond human understanding. These weren't just buildings, they were instruments tuned to play on the emotions of everyone who stepped inside. Today, we're going to uncover the secrets behind these sonic wonders. How did ancient builders, without blueprints or calculators, create spaces where sound behaves in ways that still baffle modern scientists? What were they trying to achieve? Was it worship, control, or something even deeper? And why does the echo of a 1,000-year-old chant still send shivers down our spines? This is more than just a study of architecture. It's a journey into the minds of the past, where science and spirituality collide in the most extraordinary ways. So lean in and listen closely, because the walls of history have stories to tell, and they're waiting for you to hear them. The ancient world was filled with architects who didn't just build structures, they sculpted sound itself. Take the great theaters of Greece, where every seat, no matter how high, could catch the softest whisper from the stage below, the secret limestone. This porous stone absorbed just enough noise to prevent echoes while reflecting voices forward with startling clarity. But it wasn't just about materials. The shape of these spaces played a crucial role. The semicircular design of Greek amphitheaters acted like a natural megaphone, channeling sound waves upward in a smooth, unbroken arc. Even the steps between seats were carefully spaced to scatter low-frequency noises, ensuring only the performer's voice rang true. Now travel across the world to the temples of India, where sound took on a spiritual dimension. Here, builders carved concave walls and domed ceilings that turned chants into swirling, otherworldly echoes. At the Vitala temple, pillars were designed to produce musical notes when struck, an ancient instrument built into the very architecture. These weren't random effects. They were deliberate, crafted to make worshippers feel as though the gods themselves were answering their prayers. The precision was so exact that modern researchers have found these spaces amplify certain frequencies while canceling others, creating pockets where sound seems to hang in the air, defying physics. What's truly astonishing is how these techniques emerged without the tools we rely on today. Ancient builders had no oscilloscopes or sound meters, just keen observation and generations of trial and error. They listened to how wind moved through caves, how water shaped stone, and translated those lessons into architecture. In Chichen Itza, the stepped pyramids were arranged so a clap at the base would produce an echo mimicking the cry of the sacred Quetzal bird. At Malta's hypogeum, an underground chamber was tuned so deeply that low chants could vibrate through a person's bones. These weren't just feats of engineering, they were acts of artistry, blending science and symbolism in ways we're still unraveling. Today, archaeologists use lasers and 3D modeling to decode these acoustic secrets, but the more they uncover, the more questions arise. How did cultures separated by continents and centuries arrive at such similar solutions? Was it coincidence, or did they share some lost knowledge? And why does standing in these spaces still stir something primal in us? The answer might lie in something deeper than architecture, in the universal human instinct to shape sound into meaning, to turn vibration into awe. These ancient builders didn't just want us to hear their world. They wanted us to feel it. Whispering galleries are like nature's own secret telephone lines, spaces where a hushed word can travel farther than a shout. Picture standing in the dome of Gol Gumbaz in India, where a whisper against one wall curls along the curve of the ceiling and lands crystal clear in the ear of someone over 100 feet away. Or step into St. Paul's Cathedral in London, where the famous Whispering Gallery lets voices glide along its circular wall, defying distance and logic. But these aren't modern marvels. The idea stretches back centuries, even millennia, to places like the Mayan temple of Kukulkan, where a murmur at the base of the staircase could rise as if carried by invisible hands. What's fascinating isn't just that these spaces exist, but why they were built. Imagine being an ancient priest standing in a dimly lit chamber, your voice traveling unseen to a follower across the room. Suddenly, you're not just a person, but a vessel of the divine. These galleries weren't architectural accidents. They were tools of power and mystery. Leaders and spiritual figures used them to stage miracles, making it seem as though they could speak without moving their lips or hear confessions from across the room. The effect was psychological genius. If a ruler's whisper could reach you no matter where you stood, wouldn't you believe they had supernatural ties? The science behind these galleries reveals just how carefully they were crafted. Sound travels along concave surfaces in a phenomenon called whispering gallery wave propagation, where waves cling to curved walls like a train hugging its tracks. Ancient builders didn't have textbooks explaining this. They learned by ear and intuition. At Kukulkan, the steps act like a sonic mirror, bouncing sound in precise angles. In some Chinese imperial tombs, narrow corridors amplify footsteps to create the illusion of unseen guards. The precision is staggering. Modern engineers use computer models to replicate these effects, yet centuries ago, artisans achieved them with chisels and patience. But here's the lingering question: what were they saying? Were these galleries used for sacred rituals, secret councils, or even espionage? In a world without wires or radios, controlling sound meant controlling information. A king could relay orders without messengers. A priest could answer a supplicant's silent prayer. The walls became collaborators in the art of influence. And perhaps that's the true magic of these spaces. They remind us that sound isn't just physics. It's theater, it's authority, it's the invisible thread connecting the mundane to the divine. Even now, standing in one of these galleries, you can't help but lower your voice, as if sharing a secret with history itself. Deep inside the ancient passage tomb of Newgrange, a single note can ripple through the air like a stone dropped in still water. This 5,000-year-old structure in Ireland isn't just a feat of stonework, it's a carefully tuned resonator. When voices rise in chant, the low, rounded walls amplify certain frequencies while dampening others, creating a pulsating effect that seems to vibrate through your very bones. It's no accident. The builders shaped the chamber so that sound doesn't just travel, it transforms. wrapping around the space in waves that feel almost tangible. Similar discoveries in Malta's hypogeum reveal an even more startling truth. These spaces weren't just amplifying sound, they were curating it. Modern experiments show that the hypogeum's oval chambers resonate at a frequency of 110 Hz, a pitch that just happens to synchronize with human brainwaves. At this specific vibration, the brain's parietal lobe, responsible for spatial awareness, begins to quiet. The result, a sensation of dissolving boundaries, as if the walls between the physical and spiritual worlds are thinning. Ancient worshippers chanting in these spaces wouldn't have needed hallucinogens to feel transported. The architecture itself became the gateway, using sound to gently nudge the mind into a trance-like state. Imagine standing in that shadowy chamber, voices swelling around you until the very air seems charged with something beyond explanation. Was this the original intention, to engineer transcendence? The connection between sound and altered states isn't just speculation. From Tibetan singing bowls to Gregorian chants, cultures worldwide have long used specific frequencies to induce meditation or heightened awareness. But the precision of these ancient monuments suggests something more deliberate. At Newgrange, the alignment isn't just acoustic, it's celestial. The winter solstice sun pierces the entrance, flooding the inner chamber with light at the same moment the acoustics are most potent. Sound and light converge, creating a multisensory experience designed to overwhelm the ordinary senses. It's a reminder that these builders weren't just stacking stones. They were composing an experience, using every tool at their disposal to orchestrate awe. What's most striking is how universal this knowledge seems to have been. In Peru, the Temple of the Moon features niches that hum when wind passes through them, producing tones eerily similar to those in Malta. In Turkey, the underground city of Derinkuyu has corridors that turn whispers into reverberating echoes, mimicking the effects of Newgrange. How did cultures separated by oceans and millennia stumble upon the same acoustic principles? Some researchers suggest it began with observation, noticing how sound behaved in caves or natural rock formations, then replicating those conditions. Others argue it points to a lost tradition of sonic science, passed down through generations of architects and priests. Perhaps the answer lies somewhere in between. These monuments weren't just temples or tombs. They were instruments of perception, fine-tuned to play on the deepest layers of human consciousness. When a chant echoed through Newgrange or the hypogeum, it wasn't just a prayer, it was a key, turning some invisible lock in the mind. And even now, millennia later, standing in these spaces, you can feel it, the weight of sound as something alive, something sacred, a reminder that the past wasn't silent. It was singing. High on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, the Oracle of Delphi didn't just speak, she resonated. Pilgrims who climbed those winding paths weren't just seeking answers, they were stepping into an acoustic trap, meticulously crafted by geology and human hands. Beneath the temple floor, fissures in the earth leaked ethylene gas, a sweet-smelling vapor known to induce trance-like states. But the real magic happened when the oracle's voice, already altered by intoxication, met the chamber's carefully sculpted walls. The space wasn't just a room, it was an echo chamber designed to bend and warp sound until every word felt like it came from the gods themselves. Imagine standing in that shadowy inner sanctum, the air thick with incense and the low hum of chanting priests. Then the oracle's voice cuts through, not as a clear declaration, but as something distorted, layered, almost multiplied by the walls around her. A simple phrase like "know thyself" might ripple through the space, bouncing off the limestone until it seemed to come from every direction at once. To a pilgrim already lightheaded from the climb and the gases, this wasn't just a voice. It was the divine whispering directly into their ears. the temple's architects had turned acoustics into a psychological lever, one that could pry open minds and plant suggestions as effortlessly as the wind carries seeds. What's chilling is how deliberate this all was. The priests of Delphi didn't just stumble upon these effects, they curated them. The chamber's dimensions, the placement of the oracle's seat, even the angle of the entrance passage were all tuned to manipulate sound. Modern acoustic studies reveal that the space amplified lower frequencies, giving voices a deeper, more authoritative tone. At the same time, the stone absorbed higher pitches, smoothing out the oracle's words into an eerie, otherworldly monotone. It was the ancient equivalent of a sound engineer's mixing board, tweaking the audio to maximize its impact, and impact it had. Kings and generals made military decisions based on those garbled prophecies. Cities rose and fell on the oracle's riddles, all because someone, centuries ago, realized that sound could be weaponized. But here's the twist: the real power of Delphi wasn't in the deception, it was in the collaboration. The pilgrims wanted to believe. They arrived already primed by days of fasting, ritual baths, and the sheer weight of expectation. The oracle's distorted voice wasn't just fooling them, it was meeting them halfway, giving form to the divine presence they already felt humming in their bones. In a way, the acoustics of Delphi were the original virtual reality, a sensory illusion so convincing it blurred the line between theater and transcendence. Today, we'd call it immersive design. Then it was pure mysticism, but both then and now the lesson remains the same. Sound doesn't just reach our ears. It rewires our minds, and the ancient world's masters of acoustics knew that better than anyone. The Great Pyramid of Giza doesn't whisper, it thrums. Step inside the king's chamber, and you'll feel it before you hear it. A low, persistent vibration humming through the granite walls like the distant growl of thunder trapped in stone. This isn't just background noise. The chamber's dimensions are perfect 19 by 38 feet create a resonance that amplifies frequencies close to the natural pitch of a human voice. When chants or drum beats filled this space thousands of years ago, the sound wouldn't just echo. It would multiply, layering upon itself until the air itself seemed to pulse with energy. To the priests performing rituals here, it must have felt as though the pyramid wasn't just a tomb, but a living entity breathing sound back at them. Now consider the grand gallery, that towering, narrow passageway leading to the chamber. Its corbelled walls don't just look dramatic, they act like a sonic funnel. Recent experiments show that a single clap here can produce a cascade of echoes, each bounce precisely timed to create a rhythmic pattern. Some researchers believe this wasn't accidental. The gallery might have functioned as a kind of sound ladder, where specific tones, repeated at intervals, mimic the ancient Egyptian concept of the duat, the rhythmic, cyclical journey of the soul through the afterlife. Imagine a priest's chant rising through the gallery, each reverberation symbolizing another step the pharaoh's spirit took toward eternity. But the pyramid's acoustics weren't just about guidance, they were also about warning. The so-called air shafts leading from the chambers aren't just architectural quirks. When wind passes through them at certain angles, they produce an eerie, flute-like whistle. To an intruder creeping through the dark, that sound would seem disembodied, almost supernatural. Combine that with the way low-frequency rumbles in the subterranean chamber can make your ribcage vibrate, and you have a recipe for primal fear. It's no wonder later explorers spoke of curses. The pyramid wasn't just silent stone. It reacted, using sound to unsettle and disorient. What's most striking is how these effects intertwine with the pyramid's spiritual purpose. The ancient Egyptians believed words held creative power, that speaking a name could summon its essence. In a space where sound behaves so unnaturally, every utterance would feel magnified, charged with intention. When a priest recited spells from the Book of the Dead, the echoes might have seemed like the gods whispering back. Even the pyramid's outer casing stones, polished to reflect sunlight, could have turned the entire structure into a beacon of light and sound visible and audible for miles across the desert. Today, scientists use lasers and microphones to map the pyramid's acoustic fingerprints, but the deeper mystery remains: how much of this was calculated? Did the builders understand wave interference, or were they working from intuition, observing how sound moved through earlier tombs? And why does standing in these chambers still trigger something visceral in us, a sense that we're not just hearing echoes, but eavesdropping on a conversation between worlds? The pyramids defy silence because they were never meant to be quiet. They were built to vibrate, to hum, to sing the pharaohs into the stars. And if you listen closely, you can almost catch the tune. The limestone steps of the theater of Epidaurus aren't just seats, they're a sonic sieve, meticulously carved to catch human speech while letting background noise slip away like sand through fingers. Built into the lush hills of the Peloponnese over 2,000 years ago, this masterpiece of ancient engineering lets a coin dropped at center stage sound as crisp in the top row as if it landed at your feet. The secret: those stepped rows aren't random. Each one acts like a tiny soundboard, reflecting voices upward while the porous limestone absorbs stray echoes, creating a bubble of perfect clarity. Modern acoustic scans reveal something even more astonishing. The spacing between seats corresponds almost exactly to the wavelength of human speech, turning the entire theater into a natural amplifier. But the real genius of Epidaurus isn't just technical, it's democratic. In a society where theater was sacred, where every citizen had the right to hear and be heard, the architecture became a metaphor. The semicircular design ensured no seat was privileged. A shepherd in the back row experienced the play with the same immediacy as a magistrate in the front. Even the wind played its part. The theater's open-air design allowed breezes to carry voices rather than scatter them, as if the gods themselves were cupping hands around the actors' words. This wasn't just entertainment, it was communal alchemy, turning breath into shared emotion. What's haunting is how precisely the Greeks understood what modern science would only quantify millennia later. Those limestone seats, they're calibrated to filter out frequencies below 200 Hz, the rumble of crowds, the rustle of fabric, while amplifying the mid-range tones of human speech. The slope of the theater, a precise 34 degrees, the ideal angle for sound waves to travel unimpeded. Even the stage floor, built with hollow chambers beneath it, acted as a resonance box, giving actors an acoustic boost before their voices ever reached the steps. Today, engineers still puzzle over how the builders achieved this without digital modeling or laser measurements. Some argue it was trial and error, generations of artisans refining designs from earlier wooden theaters. Others suspect the Greeks had a deeper grasp of harmonic principles than surviving texts reveal, but perhaps the answer lies in something simpler: obsession. To the Greeks, theater wasn't just art, it was a conduit for truth, a place where the human condition was laid bare. When every whisper of Medea's grief or Oedipus' rage needed to land with knife-sharp precision, acoustics weren't engineering, they were moral necessity. Stand in the empty theater at dawn when the first birdsong ricochets off those ancient stones, and you'll feel it, a space that doesn't just carry sound but honors it. The actors are gone now, but the architecture remains a frozen echo of voices that once held thousands breathless. It's a reminder that great design isn't about dominating nature, but collaborating with it. The Greeks didn't fight the wind or the hills, they listened, and in that listening they taught sound how to soar. Stand at the base of El Castillo in Chichen Itza, Clap your hands once, and the pyramid answers back, not with a simple echo, but with the piercing cry of the sacred Quetzal bird. This isn't some trick of the wind. Every step of this towering pyramid was carved with mathematical precision, each angle and edge tuned to slice sound waves like a prism splitting light. The Maya didn't just build a monument, they engineered an instrument, one that transformed human noise into something sacred. When priests climbed these steps during ceremonies, their chants wouldn't just echo, they'd morph, twisting into avian calls that seemed to pour from the sky itself. To the crowd below, it wasn't merely architecture, it was magic, proof that the boundary between earth and spirit was thinner than a whisper. The science behind this illusion is as elegant as it is precise. Each of El Castillo's 91 steps acts like a tiny sound mirror, bouncing noise at slightly different intervals. When a clap or drumbeat hits these surfaces, the reflections overlap in just the right way to mimic the Quetzal's distinctive chirp, a sound the Maya associated with divine messages. Modern acoustic scans reveal something even more astonishing. The pyramid's terraces aren't uniform. Their heights vary by fractions of an inch, a deliberate tweak to fine-tune the echo's pitch. It's as if the builders had an invisible tuning fork, adjusting each stone until the very air sang back in the correct key. But why go to such lengths for a bird call? The answer lies in the Quetzal's mythic role. This emerald-plumed creature was considered a bridge between worlds, its feathers worn by kings to signal their connection to the gods. By embedding its cry into the pyramid stones, the Maya turned El Castillo into a spiritual switchboard, a place where human voices could summon celestial responses. Imagine standing in the plaza at dusk, watching torchlight flicker on the carved serpent heads as a priest's chant triggers a chorus of ghostly Quetzal cries. In that moment, the pyramid wasn't just a structure. It was a living conduit, vibrating with the belief that sound could stitch the cosmos together. What's truly humbling is how little the Maya had to work with. No oscilloscopes, no computer models, just an ear for harmonics and generations of observation. They likely honed their craft in smaller structures first, testing how sound bounced off plazas and platforms before scaling up to El Castillo's grandeur. Even the pyramid's alignment plays a role. During equinoxes, sunlight slithers down the steps like a serpent, synchronizing visual and acoustic spectacle. This wasn't just engineering, it was poetry written in stone and air. Today, archaeologists use lasers to map the pyramid's sonic fingerprints, but the deeper mystery endures. How many other singing structures lie hidden in the jungle, their voices silenced by time? And what does it mean that cultures from Greece to Guatemala all discovered ways to make architecture speak? Perhaps the answer isn't in the stones, but in us, in our universal longing to hear the world talk back. When El Castillo's echoes still raise goosebumps after 1,000 years, it's proof that the Maya didn't just build for the eye. They built for the ear, the heart, the parts of us that still believe in unseen voices. Listen closely. That's not just an echo you're hearing, it's a conversation across centuries. Stonehenge stands silent now, its towering stones weathered by millennia. But if you could travel back 4,000 years, you might hear something extraordinary. The ringing of bluestones under hammer blows, their metallic chimes echoing across Salisbury Plain like a giant prehistoric instrument. These stones, transported over 150 miles from Wales, weren't just chosen for their size or color. When struck, they produce eerie, bell-like tones, a phenomenon that earned them the nickname, the Neolithic glockenspiel. Picture a group of ancient people gathered at dawn, the air vibrating with these otherworldly sounds as sunlight spills between the pillars. This wasn't just a calendar or a temple. It was a soundscape designed to turn ritual into an immersive sensory experience. Modern experiments reveal just how intentional this acoustic design might have been. Researchers using silicone mallets to tap the remaining blue stones found they emit frequencies between 95 and 320 Hz, a range that overlaps with the human voice and drum beats. When arranged in their original circular formation, these stones would have created standing waves, bouncing sound inward to create pockets where noise amplified or cancelled out. Imagine standing in one spot and hearing a chant swell around you, then taking 3 steps left and suddenly experiencing silence. The effect would have felt supernatural, as if the stones themselves were controlling what you could hear. But why go to such lengths? One theory points to healing. In Welsh folklore, blue stones were believed to have curative properties, and their sonic vibrations may have been used in shamanic rituals. The low, resonant tones could induce trance states, aligning with global traditions where sound is used to alter consciousness. Another possibility ties the acoustics to astronomy. During solstices, the alignment of Stonehenge's stones creates dramatic light patterns, but what if sound played a role too? A drumbeat or chant at sunrise might have ricocheted between the pillars in precise rhythms, turning the monument into a celestial metronome, marking time not just with shadows but with echoes. The most tantalizing clue lies in the stone's arrangement. Unlike later, more symmetrical circles, Stonehenge's original layout was slightly irregular, with gaps and clusters that would have scattered sound unpredictably. Some researchers suggest this wasn't a flaw but a feature, a way to create acoustic shadows where certain frequencies faded, making whispers in one spot audible only to those standing in another. It's as if the builders encoded secrecy into the architecture, ensuring only the initiated knew where to stand to hear the full message. What's striking is how this mirrors other ancient sites. From the chanting chambers of Newgrange to the whistling corridors of Chichen Itza, cultures worldwide seem to share an understanding that sound could shape reality. Stonehenge's ruins may seem mute today, but their very silence hints at what's lost, a time when monuments didn't just stand against the sky, they sang to it. And if we listen closely, not with our ears, but with our tools and our imagination, we might just catch the faintest echo of that ancient song. Step into the echoing halls of the baths of Caracalla, where the slap of sandals on marble and the murmur of 1,000 conversations didn't just fill the air, they were designed to. The Romans didn't just build baths, they orchestrated them, turning water, steam, and sound into tools of social cohesion. Those soaring domes weren't just for show. They acted like acoustic lenses, capturing every droplet of falling water, every laugh, every whispered secret, and amplifying them into a symphony of communal life. Imagine reclining in the warm mist of the caldarium, the sound of splashing from the pools bouncing off the curved ceiling above, transforming into a rhythmic, almost musical backdrop. This wasn't accidental ambience, it was calculated to make you feel part of something larger, a shared experience where even the acoustics whispered, "You belong here." But beneath the harmony lay a sharper truth. Sound was also a weapon of control. The baths weren't just social hubs, they were microcosms of Roman hierarchy, and the acoustics enforced the rules. In the grand central halls, voices carried effortlessly, ensuring gossip traveled fast, and so did reputations. A senator's booming pronouncements would resonate with authority, while a merchant's haggling might fade into the hum of the crowd. The architecture amplified status as much as speech. Even the placement of fountains was strategic. Their constant burble masked private conversations in alcoves while drowning out dissent in the public areas. The message was clear. In Rome, even relaxation had a soundtrack, and the elite composed it. The engineering behind this was deceptively simple yet brilliant. The bath's massive concrete domes, lined with hollow terracotta tubes, acted like natural amplifiers, lightening the structure while enhancing sound reflection. The Romans had discovered what modern architects call the whispering gallery effect centuries before it had a name. Water played its part too. The shallow pools reflected sound waves, creating overlapping echoes that gave the space a sense of boundless energy. Modern acoustic studies of surviving ruins reveal something startling. The reverberation time in these spaces was nearly identical to that of a modern concert hall. Every splash, every clink of a strigil, every murmur was tuned to linger just long enough to feel communal, but not so long as to become chaos. What's most fascinating isn't the technical achievement, but the psychological one. The baths were Rome's great equalizer, a place where citizens, freedmen, and even slaves might share the same waters. Yet the acoustics subtly reinforced the social order. The echoing domes reminded you that your voice was part of a collective, but the way sound carried also ensured you knew your place within it. A slave's whisper might dissolve into the steam, while a patrician's jest would ripple across the room. This was sonic politics, a reminder that in Rome, even the air conspired to teach you your rank. Today, standing in the ruins, it's hard not to hear the ghosts of those engineered echoes. The crumbling walls still catch sound oddly, a faint reminder of how thoroughly the Romans understood that architecture wasn't just about space, it was about behavior. They didn't just want you to bathe, they wanted you to listen, to feel the weight of the empire in every drop of water and every whispered word. The baths weren't just for washing away grime. They were for immersing yourself in the sound of Rome itself. Deep in the cliffs of Maharashtra, the Ajanta and Ellora caves don't just house ancient Buddhist art, they breathe with sound. Carved painstakingly into solid rock over centuries, these chambers weren't merely shelters for monks, they were instruments, fine-tuned to transform human chant into something transcendent. Step inside the grand Chaitya halls where towering stupas rise like frozen flames, and you'll feel it immediately. The air itself seems thicker, as if the walls are holding onto every note. When monks gathered here to recite sutras, their voices didn't just echo, they multiplied, layering upon themselves until the space vibrated with a low, droning hum. Modern measurements reveal something astonishing. The curvature of these caves amplifies frequencies between 70 and 110 Hz, precisely the range known to slow brainwaves and induce meditative states. The architects of Ajanta and Ellora didn't have oscilloscopes or frequency charts. They had something far more profound, generations of observation. By studying how sound behaved in natural caves, they learned to sculpt stone to mimic those effects. The walls curve inward like cupped hands, catching and cradling sound waves. The ceilings arch at precise angles to prevent echoes from scattering chaotically, instead directing them back to the listener in smooth, rhythmic waves. Even the placement of pillars was deliberate, spaced not just for structural support, but to create pockets where certain pitches would resonate more powerfully. When a monk chanted the syllable Am, the cave's acoustics stretched that single note into a tapestry of harmonics, as if the mountain itself were joining in. But the true genius of these caves lies in their imperfection. Unlike the mathematically precise theaters of Greece, Ajanta and Ellora's chambers are slightly asymmetrical. This wasn't carelessness, it was acoustic alchemy. The irregularities prevent sound from becoming trapped in repetitive loops, instead creating a living, shifting soundscape. A chant might start at the altar as a clear tone, then ripple outward, morphing into something richer and more complex as it bounces off uneven surfaces. To a meditating monk, this would have felt like the voice of the universe itself, never static, always evolving, a sonic metaphor for the Buddhist principle of impermanence. What's even more remarkable is how these caves catered to different stages of practice. Smaller chambers near the entrances have sharper acoustics, ideal for learning and reciting texts. Deeper inside, the caves grow larger and more resonant, their walls absorbing higher frequencies while amplifying the deeper, vibrational tones used in advanced meditation. The farthest chambers, often adorned with sculptures of the Buddha, produce echoes that linger for nearly 8 seconds, long enough for a single chant to overlap with the next, creating a self-sustaining drone. It's as if the caves were designed to guide monks along the spiritual path, with sound as their teacher. Today, scientists use laser scans to map these sonic wonders, but the caves guard their secrets closely. Some frequencies still defy explanation, like the mysterious phantom tones reported in certain passages, notes that seem to arise from nowhere, audible only at specific points in the chamber. Others believe the cave's alignment with seasonal winds creates natural soundscapes when air currents pass through fissures, producing an ever-changing backdrop of whispers and hums. Standing in these caves now, even empty, you can sense the lingering presence of centuries of devotion. The walls still remember the vibrations of countless chants, the way stone remembers water. And perhaps that's the deepest lesson of Ajanta and Ellora. Sound isn't just something we hear, it's something we inhabit, a space where physics and spirituality converge. The monks didn't just use these caves to meditate, they let the caves meditate through them, turning stone and air into a bridge between the earthly and the eternal. Rising like stone forests toward the heavens, Gothic cathedrals were more than feats of engineering. They were acoustic miracles. Walk into Chartres Cathedral on an empty afternoon and clap your hands just once. The sound doesn't fade away, it swirls, climbing the ribbed vaults and cascading back down in waves that linger for nearly 10 seconds. This wasn't an accident of design. Those soaring ceilings and intricate stone tracery were carefully calculated to create what acousticians now call sacred resonance. A reverberation so rich it turns even the simplest melody into something celestial. When a choir filled these spaces with Gregorian chant, the overlapping echoes didn't just amplify the music, they transformed it, layering each note until the air itself seemed to vibrate with divine presence. The secret lies in the mathematics of stone. Gothic architects, though they lacked modern sound science, understood instinctively that certain proportions could shape sound as precisely as a sculptor shapes clay. The cathedral's narrow, towering naves, often 7 times taller than they are wide, created a vertical channel where sound waves could climb and reflect without dissipating. The pointed arches and ribbed vaults acted like acoustic lenses, focusing sound downward toward the congregation rather than letting it scatter. Even the stained glass windows played a role. Their leaded panes absorbed higher frequencies, leaving the deeper, more resonant tones to linger. The result was a sonic environment where every whisper of prayer, every note of plainsong, felt magnified not just in volume but in meaning. This acoustic alchemy had a profound psychological effect. Studies of modern visitors show that prolonged exposure to these reverberations slows heart rates and induces a meditative state, exactly what medieval worshippers might have described as feeling closer to God. The architects weren't just building spaces, they were engineering experiences, using sound to bypass rational thought and speak directly to the soul. When sunlight streamed through rose windows at dawn, painting the stone in jewel tones, and a choir's chant swirled through the vaults like audible incense, the boundary between earth and heaven didn't just blur, it dissolved. Yet the cathedral's acoustics weren't just about transcendence, they were also about control. In an era when most of the congregation couldn't understand Latin, the emotion of the Mass mattered more than the words. The echoing chants created a sense of awe that reinforced the Church's authority, turning theology into something felt rather than explained. Even the placement of pulpits was strategic, positioned at nodes where sound waves intersected. A preacher's voice could seem to come from everywhere at once, as if the building itself were speaking. What's astonishing is how these effects were achieved without a single blueprint or acoustic equation. Master builders passed down their knowledge through apprenticeships, refining designs over generations. They might not have known about sound wave interference or frequency response, but they knew how to listen, how to adjust a vault's curve or a pillar's thickness until the space sang correctly. Modern simulations reveal that tiny details like the carved foliage on capitals or the texture of stone subtly shaped the acoustics, proving these craftsmen were working at a level of intuition we're only beginning to quantify. Stand in charters today during a quiet moment and you'll feel it, that hush that isn't quite silence, the way the walls seem to hold their breath, waiting for the next note. These cathedrals weren't just built to be seen, they were built to be heard, to turn human voices into something timeless. And when the last chord fades, you're left with a haunting certainty that if angels ever did sing on earth, this is where their echoes would linger. High in the Andes, the Incas built walls that don't just stand, they sing. At Machu Picchu, certain stone structures hum with an eerie, flute-like tone when the wind sweeps through carefully placed niches. These aren't random gaps in the masonry. Each one is a precision-cut aperture, angled to catch the breeze at just the right velocity, transforming gusts into melodies that ripple through the ruins. To modern ears, it might sound like accidental music, but to the Inca, these walls were likely instruments of both practicality and mysticism. The same culture that carved staircases into sheer cliff faces and engineered terraces that resisted earthquakes didn't leave acoustics to chance. What's astonishing is the craftsmanship behind these sonic puzzles. The niches aren't mere holes, they're tapered, their edges beveled to refine the airflow like the mouthpiece of a wooden quina flute. Some researchers believe they functioned as early warning systems, their tones shifting with wind speed to signal approaching storms. Others argue they were ritual devices designed to mimic the cries of sacred animals or the voices of ancestors. At the Temple of the Sun, a curved wall with strategic gaps produces harmonics that mirror the frequencies of Inca ceremonial drums. Stand there at dusk when the wind rises, and you'll hear the stones seem to answer each other, a call and response woven into the architecture itself. The deeper mystery lies in how the Inca achieved this without metal tools or written blueprints. Their stonework fits so tightly that not even a blade of grass can slip between the joints, a technique that also creates perfect surfaces for sound reflection. When a breeze funnels through a corridor of these polished walls, the sound doesn't scatter. It focuses, channeled into precise pathways like water through an aqueduct. Modern acoustic scans reveal something even more startling. The placement of these sonic niches often aligns with solstice sun angles, suggesting the Inca synchronized sound and light into multisensory rituals. But perhaps the most haunting possibility is that these walls were meant to be played. At Ollantaytambo, certain terraces echo back specific musical intervals when struck, a fifth here, an octave there, as if the stones were tuned to an ancient scale. Ethnographers note that Andean traditions still speak of talking stones, and it's not hard to imagine priests or musicians interacting with these structures during ceremonies, drawing out sounds that seem to come from the earth itself. The Inca didn't just build with stone, they composed with it, turning wind and touch into a language we're only beginning to decode. Stand silent at Machu Picchu today, and you might catch it, a faint, whistling note threading through the ruins as if the walls are whispering secrets across 6 centuries. The Inca left no written records of their acoustic designs, but the stones themselves are a testament. They didn't just want their city to be seen or climbed. They wanted it to be heard, a symphony carved into the bones of the mountains, and sometimes when the wind is just right, that symphony still plays. Descending into a puebloan kiva feels like stepping into the earth's own listening ear. These circular chambers, carved deep into the ground, weren't just meeting places. They were acoustic marvels, turning the softest whisper into a voice that seemed to rise from the very walls. The ancestral puebloans understood something profound. Sound behaves differently underground. The compact, rounded shape of a kiva acts like a natural amplifier, with curved walls that catch and cradle even the faintest utterance, bouncing it inward in layers until it fills the space. A leader speaking to their council wouldn't need to raise their voice. The architecture would do it for them, wrapping every word in resonance, making each syllable feel weighted with significance. What's striking is how deliberately these spaces were engineered for collective experience. The kiva's central fire pit wasn't just for warmth or light, it was an acoustic anchor. Heat rising from the flames created subtle air currents that carried sound upward, while the surrounding bench seats reflected voices back toward the center. This created a sound spiral where speech would ripple outward and return, enveloping everyone in the circle equally. No one sat at the back of the room here. The design ensured every participant, whether elder or apprentice, heard with the same clarity. Modern acoustic studies of reconstructed kivas reveal something even more remarkable. The chambers naturally enhance frequencies around 200 Hz, the range of a calm, authoritative human voice, while softening higher pitches that might carry tension or agitation. The architecture wasn't just amplifying sound, it was curating tone, fostering the kind of measured discourse essential for governance or sacred rites. But the kiva's genius extends beyond mere acoustics. The small, vaulted entrance shaft, more than just a ladder passage, acted as a wind instrument. When desert gusts swept across the opening above, they could produce a low, harmonic drone like the hum of a giant didgeridoo. To a group gathered below, this natural soundscape would have felt like the earth itself murmuring approval. Some researchers suggest this phenomenon was intentional, a way to blur the line between human deliberation and what the puebloans might have perceived as the voice of the land. Imagine sitting in that dim, earthen space as a council debated planting cycles or drought responses, the very walls seeming to weigh in with their own resonant feedback. The kiva's legacy challenges modern assumptions about ancient technology. Without formal acoustical science, the puebloans achieved surround sound centuries before concert halls or headphones. Their materials were simple, packed earth, timber, stone, but their understanding was sophisticated. Even the plaster lining the walls played a role. Mixed with crushed pottery shards, it created a slightly porous surface that prevented echoes from becoming chaotic, much like the acoustic panels in modern theaters. This wasn't primitive engineering, it was precision work honed over generations of observing how sound moved through canyons, caves, and finally, these crafted chambers. Today, stepping into a preserved kiva, you can still feel the intentionality humming in the air, the way your own breath seems louder, the way a spoken word lingers just a heartbeat longer than it should. These spaces weren't built for solitude. They were built for communion, for voices to weave together until it became impossible to tell where one speaker ended and the next began. In an age of digital amplification and echo chambers, the kiva stands as a quiet testament to an ancient truth. The most powerful sound systems aren't made of wires and code. They're made of earth and intention, designed not to dominate the ear, but to unite it. High above the ancient gardens of China, the wind didn't just blow, it composed. Each breeze that swept through a pagoda's eaves set dozens of bronze bells into motion, their delicate chimes cascading like liquid notes through the air. These weren't ordinary decorations. Every bell, from the largest at the base to the tiniest at the pinnacle, was tuned to a precise pitch, part of an intricate sonic lattice believed to align earthly energy with the harmony of the heavens. To the Chinese, sound wasn't just vibration, it was a bridge between realms, and these towers were its architects. The science behind the pagoda's music reveals a breathtaking precision. Craftsmen cast each bell with exact proportions, adjusting thickness and shape until it resonated at one of the 12 notes of the traditional Lu scale. When hung together, their intervals created perfect fifths and octaves, so even random breezes produced harmonious patterns. Modern acoustic analysis shows something astonishing. The arrangement wasn't random. Lower-pitched bells dominated the bottom tiers, their deeper tones symbolizing the earth, while higher frequencies clustered near the top, mirroring the celestial realm. As wind traveled upward, the scale literally ascended, creating a sonic metaphor for the journey from mortal to divine. But these bells weren't just for meditation, they were sonic guardians. Ancient texts describe how their frequencies were believed to disrupt malevolent forces, their pure tones cleansing distorted energy. The Yingzhou Fashi, an 11th century architectural manual, specifies exact placements to maximize this effect. Bells facing cardinal directions to ward off evil influences, or clustered at corners where negative chi might gather. During storms, the crescendo of ringing wasn't just weather. It was spiritual warfare, the pagoda transforming into a fortress of sound. The psychological impact was equally profound. Visitors approaching a pagoda would first hear the faintest tinkling, a subtle cue to slow their steps and quiet their minds. By the time they reached the base, the layered harmonies would have shifted their state of awareness, the way a temple's incense prepares the senses for ritual. This was auditory feng shui, using sound to sculpt human experience as deliberately as a gardener prunes bonsai. Even the spacing between bells mattered. Too close, and the tones would clash, creating sound sickness. Too far apart, and the magic dissipated. What's most remarkable is how these principles persist. In Japan's Byodo-in temple, replicas of Chinese pagoda bells still ring with the same carefully tuned frequencies, their makers following centuries-old casting techniques. Modern architects have borrowed the concept, designing buildings with sound mirrors that filter urban noise into soothing patterns. And scientists now confirm what the ancients intuited. Certain frequencies do alter brain activity, reducing stress hormones much like those pagoda breezes once calmed imperial scholars. Stand beneath one of these towers today when the wind stirs, and you'll feel it the way the air itself seems to shimmer with intention. Those bells weren't just marking time. They were stitching the audible to the invisible, proving that the right sound in the right place could do more than please the ear. It could rearrange the soul. Rising from the rooftops of ancient Persian cities, the towering badgers weren't just architectural marvels, they were instruments played by the wind itself. These intricate wind catchers, designed to funnel cool breezes into homes below, had a hidden sonic dimension. As air rushed through their precisely angled vents, it produced an eerie chorus of whistles and hums, tones that shifted with the time of day and season. In the quiet hours before dawn, the sound might be a faint, ghostly sigh. By midday, as temperatures soared and wind speeds increased, the towers could erupt into a vibrant cacophony of pitches, each note carrying practical information to those who knew how to listen. The acoustics of these towers reveal a dual genius. On one level, the sound served as an ancient weather station. Specific tones indicated wind direction critical for predicting dust storms or the arrival of cool maritime air. Higher-pitched whistles often signaled stronger gusts, warning farmers to secure crops or merchants to lower awnings. But the badger's music also wove into the spiritual fabric of Persian life. Certain towers were tuned to produce harmonic intervals when winds came from sacred directions like the Qibla. To a culture that revered the wind as a divine breath, these harmonies weren't just noise, they were whispers from the unseen world, a celestial dialogue etched into architecture. What's astonishing is the precision behind these sonic effects. The badger's internal baffles, often carved with intricate lattice patterns, acted like the finger holes of a flute, shaping airflow into distinct frequencies. Some towers featured adjustable wooden shutters, allowing residents to tune their badger's pitch for clearer long-distance signaling. In cities like Yazd, clusters of towers created overlapping soundscapes where the combined tones could indicate the hour, much like a primitive acoustic clock. A midday wind might trigger a chorus of towers in sequence, their rising pitches functioning as a communal timekeeper for prayer or market hours. The psychological impact was equally profound. In the suffocating heat of summer, the badger's cooling breezes brought physical relief, but their sounds offered mental respite. The steady white noise of moving air masked street clamor, creating pockets of tranquility in crowded urban centers. Modern studies of similar natural soundscapes show how consistent, low-frequency tones can reduce stress hormones, an effect Persian architects may have intuited centuries ago. Some badgers were even positioned to amplify the call to prayer, blending human and wind-borne voices into a seamless expression of devotion. Yet the tower's true brilliance lies in their adaptability. Unlike static monuments, badgers were dynamic instruments, changing their song with shifting weather patterns. Winter winds produced deeper, resonant drones as cold air thickened sound waves, while summer breezes created lighter, shimmering tones. This ever-changing soundscape mirrored Persian poetic traditions, where the wind symbolized life's impermanence. To sit beneath a badger was to hear time itself passing, not in ticks or chimes, but in the restless voice of the elements. Today, as engineers study these ancient structures for sustainable cooling solutions, the acoustic legacy often goes overlooked. But in restored towers across Iran, the wind still plays its age-old melodies, a reminder that the past wasn't just seen or touched, but heard. The badgers didn't merely cool bodies, they tuned minds, turning the very air into a medium for both survival and transcendence. In their hollow chambers, the boundary between practicality and poetry didn't just blur, it vanished altogether. Standing among the towering stone walls of Great Zimbabwe, you wouldn't just see history, you'd feel it in your bones. These massive ruins, built without mortar over 8 centuries ago, weren't just a royal city. They were a vast acoustic instrument designed to carry the language of drums across miles of rugged terrain. The walls curve and angle with uncanny precision, not just for stability, but to catch and channel sound waves like a stone megaphone. When a drummer perched on these heights struck their hide-covered instrument, the rhythms wouldn't just echo, they'd project, ricocheting off strategically placed monoliths to reach distant valleys where the next drummer waited to relay the message. This wasn't just architecture, it was Africa's first wireless network built from granite and air. The genius of this system lay in its simplicity. The Shona people who constructed Great Zimbabwe understood something modern engineers still study. Low-frequency drumbeats travel farther than human speech, especially when given a boost by natural topography. By positioning their cities' walls along ridgelines and shaping them into parabolic curves, they created acoustic waveguides that could fling sound far beyond the horizon. Archaeologists have tested replicas of these walls and found they amplify specific drum frequencies by up to 12 decibels, enough to turn a local signal into a regional broadcast. Imagine standing in a distant village, hearing the deep, resonant thrum of a royal announcement ripple through the hills, carried not by wires or towers, but by stone arranged just so. What's even more remarkable is how these sonic pathways mirrored the social structure. The highest walls surrounded the king's enclosure, where the most important messages originated. As sound traveled outward, lower walls in the outer settlements would catch and retransmit the rhythms, much like signal boosters in a modern cellular network. This wasn't random. It was a physical manifestation of power, with sound flowing from the center to the periphery in a carefully orchestrated hierarchy. The drums themselves spoke in coded tones, mimicking the tonal patterns of the Shona language, a practice still used today in West Africa's talking drums. But in Great Zimbabwe, the very stones conspired to keep those messages clear across impossible distances. Modern experiments reveal another layer of sophistication. Certain passageways between walls act like natural filters, muffling irrelevant noise while enhancing drum frequencies. The stone used, a local granite rich in quartz, vibrates at frequencies that complement rather than compete with the drum's bass tones. Even the gaps between stones play a role. Packed with a clay mixture that hardens in the sun, they absorb higher pitches that could distort the signal. This level of acoustic engineering predates European concert halls by half a millennium, yet it emerged without formal acoustics textbooks or sound meters. The builders relied on generations of observation, learning how sound danced across their landscape long before physics gave it a name. But the true magic of Great Zimbabwe's soundscape wasn't just technical, it was communal. In a society without written records, these drum networks weren't just tools. They were lifelines, carrying everything from warnings of approaching traders to calls for celebration. When a rhythm pulsed through the hills, it didn't just convey information. It wove scattered villages into a single, resonant body, each beat a reminder that no one was truly isolated. The stones still whisper of that connection today. Run your hand along their sun-warmed surfaces, and you might swear you feel a vibration not from the wind, but from the memory of 1,000 drumbeats still humming in the bones of the earth. Viking longhouses didn't just house warriors, they orchestrated them. Picture a fire-lit hall on a frozen Nordic night, smoke curling toward the rafters as a skald's voice rises above the gathered crowd. The high, arched ceiling of oak beams isn't just for show. It's a soundboard catching each syllable and bouncing it downward, wrapping listeners in layers of reverberation that make the saga feel less like a story and more like a summoning. The wooden walls, packed tight with insulating turf, absorb just enough noise to prevent muddled echoes while amplifying the skald's lower tones. The rumble of a ship's prow cutting through waves, the growl of a berserker's oath. Every word hangs in the air a heartbeat longer, as if the hall itself is reluctant to let the tale end. This wasn't accidental acoustics. The Vikings built their halls with the same precision they used to carve dragon-headed ships. The length of the longhouse, often 5 times longer than it was wide, created a natural sound corridor, funneling the skald's voice from the high seat at one end to the farthest bench without losing clarity. Even the placement of tapestries was strategic. Woven with dense wool, they dampened harsh consonants while letting resonant vowels ring, smoothing the narrative into a lyrical flow. Modern reconstructions, like the one at Borg in Norway, prove the effect. A spoken phrase in one of these halls can be heard clearly over 80 feet away, with no shouting required. But the real magic wasn't just in hearing the sagas, it was in feeling them. The low-frequency vibrations of a skald's voice would resonate through the wooden benches, literally thrumming through the bones of the audience. When the tale turned to battle scenes, the skald might stamp a foot, sending a percussive boom through the floorboards that mimicked Thor's hammer. At key moments, the crackling fire would spit embers on cue, as if the flames themselves were part of the performance. This wasn't passive entertainment. It was visceral communal theater, where sound blurred the line between past and present, until listeners could almost smell the salt spray of a Viking raid or feel the weight of a hero's sword. The psychological impact was profound. In a culture without written histories, these sagas were the glue of identity, and the acoustics ensured they stuck. Studies show that stories heard in resonant spaces are remembered more vividly, their emotional weight amplified by the physical experience of sound. For Vikings, the Longhouse wasn't just a backdrop for these tales. It was a co-narrator, shaping the rhythm of the skald's delivery, punctuating silences with the creak of timber, and wrapping every listener in the same sonic embrace. When a saga spoke of ancestors, the echoes made them feel present. When it warned of monsters, the acoustics made their growls crawl up your spine. Yet the halls also served a subtler purpose: social harmony. The acoustics ensured no one could whisper privately without being overheard, discouraging dissent during gatherings. At the same time, the immersive soundscape fostered collective emotion, laughter, gasps, or roars of approval rippling through the crowd in waves. To sit in a longhouse was to be part of a single, resonant body, united by stories that outlasted the individuals who told them. Even now, standing in a reconstructed hall, you can sense how the architecture conspired to turn words into something tangible, as if the ghosts of 1,000 sagas still hum in the wood grain, waiting for the right voice to wake them. The Alhambra's walls don't just dazzle the eyes, they sing to the ears. Every intricate tile, every interlocking star and polygon in its famed geometric mosaics serves a dual purpose. While these patterns are visual masterpieces, their precise mathematical arrangements also sculpt sound waves with the precision of a composer's baton. As you walk through the Court of the Lions, your footsteps don't just echo, they dance, scattering across the walls in a delicate interplay of reverberation and silence. The tiles' repetitive, fractal-like designs break up sound waves into smaller, more musical reflections, transforming ordinary noise into something resembling wind chimes or a softly plucked oud. This wasn't decorative accident. It was acoustic alchemy rooted in Islam's golden age of scientific inquiry. What's extraordinary is how these designs mirror the era's breakthroughs in mathematics. The same principles that govern the tessellation's complex star polygons based on ratios like the golden mean also influenced how sound traveled. Modern acoustic studies reveal that the Alhambra's tile patterns create what's known as a diffusion sound field, where high frequencies scatter evenly while lower tones resonate longer, producing a balanced, immersive soundscape. The Nasrid architects may not have had the physics vocabulary we do today, but they understood the practical effects. By varying the depth and angle of tile carvings, they could tune a room's acoustics as finely as a luthier tunes an instrument. In the Hall of the Abencerrage, for instance, the Muqarna's ceiling doesn't just look like frozen honeycomb. Its cellular structure traps and redistributes sound waves, preventing harsh echoes while amplifying whispered poetry. This fusion of art and science wasn't just about aesthetics. In Islamic tradition, beauty and knowledge were inseparable paths to the divine. The Quran's own lyrical cadences were meant to be heard as much as read, and spaces like the Alhambra extended that philosophy into architecture. When a reciter's voice filled these halls, the tiles didn't just reflect sound, they refined it, softening consonants and brightening vowels until the words seemed to glow. Even the placement of fountains was acoustic genius. The Patio de los Arayanes' long reflecting pool acts as a natural bass trap, absorbing low-frequency rumble while the water's gentle trickle masks distracting noise with a calming, rhythmic veil. What's often overlooked is how these acoustic effects shaped social rituals. In the Mekshawar, where sultans held court, the tile patterns near the throne subtly amplified the ruler's voice while dispersing the murmurs of advisors, creating a sonic hierarchy. Meanwhile, private alcoves featured tighter geometric motifs that absorbed sound, ensuring clandestine conversations stayed just that, This wasn't mere decoration. It was psychological architecture, using sound to reinforce power dynamics and privacy. Today, audio engineers still study the Alhambra's walls for inspiration. The way its patterns diffuse sound has influenced modern concert hall designs, proving that medieval artisans achieved what we now need supercomputers to simulate. But perhaps the real lesson lies deeper. In a world that often separates STEM from art, the Alhambra stands as a shimmering rebuttal proof that the most profound innovations emerge when numbers and beauty share the same equation. Walk its corridors at dawn when the first light sets the tiles aflame and the air hums with the ghosts of old melodies, and you'll hear it, not just an echo, but an invitation to listen with more than your ears. High atop Mont St. Michel, where sea mists swirl around ancient stone, the very walls hum with centuries of devotion. The abbey's cloisters weren't just peaceful walkways for monks. They were sonic crucibles, transforming simple chants into something that felt heaven-sent. Picture a lone monk standing in the arched gallery as dawn breaks, his voice rising in Gregorian plainsong. The sound doesn't just travel, it blossoms, ricocheting off the slender columns and vaulted ceilings in overlapping waves until the air itself seems thick with harmony. This wasn't random resonance. Every curve of those sandstone arches was calculated to catch and cradle specific frequencies, turning human voices into a chorus that felt infinite. The secret lay in the cloister's perfect geometry. The quadrangular design, with its repeating bays and open colonnades, created a phenomenon called standing waves, sound reflections that reinforce certain frequencies while canceling others. When monks chanted in unison, their voices would lock into these acoustic pockets, amplifying the fundamental tones of the music while softening dissonant overtones. The result was a purity of sound that seemed to transcend human effort, as if the stones themselves were singing along. Modern acoustic scans reveal something astonishing. The cloister's dimensions produce a reverberation time of nearly 8 seconds, comparable to some of the world's finest concert halls. Yet this wasn't built for applause. It was built for prayer, a space where sound wasn't just heard but felt as a physical manifestation of faith. But the genius of monastic acoustics wasn't just in amplification, it was in isolation. The thick outer walls of places like Cluny Abbey acted like sonic filters, sealing out the clamor of medieval life while trapping sacred sound inside. Even the placement of windows was deliberate. Narrow apertures high on the walls allowed light to enter while preventing sound from escaping, creating a cocoon of reverberation. To step into these spaces was to enter another world, where time moved to the rhythm of breath and chant rather than the clang of marketplace bells. The architecture didn't just house spirituality. It engineered it, using acoustics to carve out a sanctuary from the noise of existence. What's often overlooked is how these designs shaped the psychology of worship. Gregorian chants, slow, monophonic lines often centered around the resonant frequency of the human voice, were perfectly suited to these spaces. The lingering echoes allowed each phrase to overlap with the next, creating a seamless tapestry of sound that discouraged individual distraction and fostered collective focus. Neuroscientists now know that such repetitive, resonant tones can induce theta brainwave states, easing listeners into deep meditation. The monks may not have understood the science, but they recognized the effect. In these cloisters, prayer didn't just pass through the mind. It sank in, carried by sound waves into the marrow. The most profound lesson lies in the builder's humility. Unlike Gothic cathedrals that reached skyward with spires, monastic cloisters turned inward, their acoustics designed not to impress but to immerse. The stones didn't shout, they whispered, drawing the ear and through it the soul deeper into contemplation. Even now, standing in the silence of these ancient walkways, you can sense the lingering presence of all those vanished voices. their vibrations stored in the stone like wine in a cask. The monks are gone, but their music lingers not as memory, but as physics, waiting for the right breath to wake it again. Step inside the Wieskirch at dusk as the last golden light filters through its frescoed ceiling, and you'll swear the walls dissolve around you. This Bavarian masterpiece, seemingly modest in size, holds an acoustic secret. Its vaulted dome and gilded curves don't just reflect sound, they stretch it, turning a single choir boy's voice into a cascade of harmonies that seem to pour from the heavens. Baroque architects didn't just build churches, they engineered sensory illusions, using reverberation as their brush to paint the infinite. When a note lingers for 6 full seconds, long enough to overlap with the next phrase, the space itself feels unmoored from earthly dimensions, as if the music is coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. The trick lies in the geometry. The Wieskirch's oval plan and concave surfaces create what physicists call late reflections, sound waves that bounce multiple times before reaching the listener's ear. Unlike Gothic cathedrals where echoes can blur into muddle, Baroque designers calibrated these delays to enhance clarity. The domed ceiling acts like a celestial amplifier, capturing high frequencies and scattering them downward in a shimmering rain, while the lower walls reinforce the bass tones, grounding the ethereal in something visceral. Modern acoustic scans reveal the precision. Sound energy decays at exactly the right rate to feel lush but never chaotic, like a perfectly tuned instrument. To worshippers in the pews, the effect was transcendent. A choir of 20 could sound like a host of angels, and a single whispered prayer might seem to hang in the air, sanctified by the space itself. But this wasn't just auditory magic, it was theological theater. In an era when the Catholic Church competed with Protestant austerity, Baroque acoustics became a weapon of wonder. Composers like Mozart wrote masses specifically for these spaces, crafting melodies that exploited the reverberation, long, sustained notes that bloomed in the dome, or quick, staccato passages that danced across the gilded stucco. Even the pauses between movements were part of the design, allowing the echoes to fade just enough before the next musical revelation. The church didn't just house the sacred, it performed it, with every note and echo choreographed to dissolve the boundary between earthly and divine. What's haunting is how these effects mirrored the era's artistic obsessions. Just as Baroque painters used trompe l'oeil to flatten walls into endless skies, architects used sound to conjure immensity. The Wieskirch's ceiling frescoes depict heaven's glory, but the real marvel is how the acoustics make that fiction audible. When a choir sings of eternity, the building answers with its own endless echo, a feedback loop of faith and physics. Modern visitors often report the same disorientation pilgrims felt centuries ago, the eerie sense that the music isn't confined to the walls, but spiraling outward into some unseen dimension. Yet beneath the grandeur lay a sly practicality. These churches were often built for rural congregations, their modest footprints belying their sonic ambition. By stretching sound vertically rather than horizontally, architects made every corner feel equally immersed, ensuring even the humblest farmer in the back row could be enveloped in glory. The Wieskirch's acoustics weren't just about awe, they were about access, democratizing the divine through the physics of resonance. Today, as audio engineers struggle to replicate these effects with digital reverb, the lesson lingers. True immersion isn't just heard. It's felt in the bones, a vibration that whispers, "This is what infinity sounds like." High on the windswept cliffs of Scotland's Outer Hebrides, the ancient stone walls of Duncarloway don't just stand guard, they listen. This 2,000-year-old broch, its concentric dristone walls rising like a jagged crown, wasn't just a fortress. It was an acoustic sentinel engineered to turn the slightest footfall into an alarm. Step too close and the curved stone would catch the crunch of gravel underfoot, amplifying it upward through hollow passages to defenders waiting above. Long before sonar or radar, these Iron Age builders had weaponized sound itself, transforming architecture into an early warning system that could mean the difference between survival and slaughter. The science behind this martial acoustics is as elegant as it is lethal. The Brock's double-walled construction creates a narrow gap between stones, just wide enough to act as a natural waveguide, channeling sound vertically like a stone megaphone. Modern tests reveal that frequencies between 100 and 300 Hz, the range of footsteps and clinking armor, are amplified by up to 15 decibels, while higher-pitched noises like bird calls or wind dissipate. This wasn't accidental. The builders intuitively understood what physicists now call frequency filtering, crafting spaces that amplified threats while ignoring ambient noise. Even the Brock's entrance tunnel plays a role. Its corbelled ceiling reflects sound inward, creating overlapping echoes that make a single intruder sound like a marching column. But Dun Carloway wasn't unique. Across the ancient world, fortifications doubled as acoustic traps. In Japan, the nightingale floors of Edo Castle were designed to chirp like birds when stepped on, their nails rubbing against clamps to betray assassins. The Maiden Castle hill fort in England used its vast, concentric ditches to distort and magnify approaching noises, making it impossible for attackers to gauge how many defenders waited beyond the ramparts. Even the legendary walls of Troy may have had sonic secrets. Homer's Iliad describes sentries hearing the breath of armored men through hollow stones, a detail long dismissed as poetic license until archaeologists found evidence of resonant limestone blocks in Trojan ruins. What's chilling is how these acoustic strategies exploited human psychology. The unnerving echo of footsteps in a place like Dun Carloway didn't just alert defenders, it played on the primal fear of being heard. Raiders creeping through fog would suddenly find their stealth undone by walls that seemed to whisper their presence to unseen watchers. Some forts took this further, using sound as psychological warfare. The Newgrange towers of Sardinia featured labyrinthine passages where defenders could clang swords or shout, creating disorienting echoes that made their numbers seem legion. A handful of warriors could sound like an army, their voices bouncing off curved walls in a chorus of calculated terror. Yet the most ingenious acoustic defenses were often the subtlest. At Scotland's Tap O' North, vitrified wall stones fused by intense heat created a glassy surface that reflected sound unpredictably, scrambling the acoustics to confuse attackers about the origin of noises. In Anatolia, Hittite forts used strategically placed water channels to carry the sound of sentries' voices further, turning whispers into long-distance alerts. These weren't crude tricks, they were the product of generations observing how sound moved through landscapes, then bending those principles to martial ends. Today, as sonar and motion sensors dominate surveillance, these ancient sonic strategies seem almost poetic in their simplicity, but stand in the shadow of Dun Carloway at dusk, when the wind dies and the stones seem to hold their breath, and you'll feel it, the eerie sense that the walls are still listening. They remind us that warfare has always been as much about perception as force, about controlling what's heard as fiercely as what's seen. Before there were radar blips or infrared scopes, there were stones that sang warnings and people wise enough to listen. Plato's account of Atlantis isn't just a tale of a sunken city. It's a blueprint for an acoustic utopia. He described temples where the very walls resonated with harmony, where chants and ceremonies were amplified to supernatural levels. Though Atlantis remains shrouded in myth, the idea of its harmonic temples isn't pure fantasy. Ancient cultures worldwide shared an obsession with sacred sound, and if Atlantis existed, its acoustics might have been the pinnacle of this forgotten science. Imagine a temple where the walls didn't just echo prayers but transformed them, where voices blended with the natural frequencies of stone to create harmonies no human throat could produce alone. The clues lie in Plato's vivid details. He wrote of concentric rings of water and land, a design that mirrors the ripple patterns of sound waves. Modern acoustic engineers note that such circular structures, when built with precise proportions, can create standing waves phenomena where certain frequencies reinforce each other, amplifying sound without distortion. The legendary orichalcum metal, said to cover Atlantis's temples, might have played a role too. Some scholars speculated could have been a copper alloy, a material known to reflect specific tones with eerie clarity. Picture a priest striking an orichalcum gong, its vibrations pulsing through the temple's curved walls, building into a crescendo that felt less like music and more like the voice of the earth itself. What's tantalizing is how this aligns with real-world ancient acoustics. From Malta's hypogeum to Mexico's Chichen Itza, builders consistently exploited natural resonance. If Atlantis's architects followed similar principles, their temples might have functioned like giant tuning forks, attuned to frequencies that altered consciousness or even manipulated the physical world. The Greek historian Diodorus Siculus hinted at this, describing Atlantean rituals where sound could move stones, a detail that echoes modern experiments with acoustic levitation. Perhaps Atlantis didn't just use sound for worship, but as a tool harnessing vibrations to construct their colossal architecture or communicate across vast distances. The mystery deepens when we consider Plato's claim that Atlantis fell out of harmony with the gods. Could this metaphor hint at acoustic decay? Civilizations like the Maya tracked cosmic cycles through sound, believing discordant frequencies brought disaster. If Atlantean temples were designed to resonate with celestial patterns like the harmonic intervals of planetary orbits, their neglect might have disrupted more than rituals. It's a haunting thought, a civilization undone not by war or famine, but by losing the right vibrational balance, their once singing stones falling silent as the sea swallowed them. Today, explorers still search for Atlantis in ocean trenches and satellite images, but its true legacy might lie in our enduring fascination with the power of sound. Every time we marvel at the whispering galleries of St. Paul's or the chanting caves of India, we're touching the same thread that Plato wove into his tale, the belief that sound can bridge the human and the divine. Atlantis may be lost, but its harmonic dream lives on, echoing through every ancient wall that still hums with forgotten songs. Modern researchers armed with laser scanners and acoustic modeling software are uncovering secrets ancient builders hid in plain stone. At Chavin de Huanta in Peru, archaeologists mapped a labyrinth of underground tunnels with a startling discovery. Certain passages amplify the roar of rushing water from nearby rivers, transforming it into a thunderous growl that seems to emanate from the temple walls. When scientists recreated these conditions using speakers, they found the low-frequency vibrations matched the resonant frequency of human chest cavities, creating a physical sensation of awe. This wasn't just clever engineering, it was a deliberate manipulation of human physiology, using sound to trigger visceral reactions we're only now measuring with precision. The tools revolutionizing this field reveal astonishing intentionality. LiDAR scans of Mayan ball courts show how their parallel walls were angled to create flutter echoes, rapid repetitions of sound that mimic the wing beats of sacred birds. In Turkey, 3D models of Neolithic structures at Göbekli Tepe demonstrate how pillars were positioned to bounce sound off each other in precise intervals, turning ritual spaces into natural surround sound systems. Perhaps most remarkably, acoustic tomography, a technique that uses sound waves to map hidden structures, has detected voids beneath Malta's hypogeum that may have functioned as subsonic resonators, producing frequencies below the threshold of hearing yet capable of altering brainwave patterns. These discoveries shatter old stereotypes about pre-technological societies. When archaeologists found that Stonehenge's missing stones once formed a complete circle, computer simulations revealed the structure would have created a contained sound field, proof that Neolithic builders understood wave interference millennia before it was named. Similarly, analysis of Greek theater design shows their seating curves follow logarithmic spirals, a mathematical principle once thought discovered centuries later. The implications are profound. Ancient cultures didn't just stumble upon these effects. They developed what amounts to an empirical science of sound, testing and refining their knowledge over generations without the crutch of written theory. What's emerging is a radical reassessment of ancient priorities. Modern concert halls strive for acoustics that serve music, but prehistoric sites suggest sound itself was the medium, a tool for transformation rather than entertainment. At Ireland's Newgrange, laser vibrometry shows how the chamber's corbelled roof acts like a sound lens, focusing specific frequencies onto the central ritual space. In Oman, archaeologists discovered Bronze Age trumpet stones that channel desert winds into harmonic tones at solstice sunrises. These weren't passive observations but active experiments in bending perception, using architecture to dissolve the boundary between natural phenomena and human experience. The most humbling realization comes from comparing notes across continents. When acoustic models of Scotland's Micho tomb matched the resonant properties of Arizona's Casa Grande ruins sites separated by oceans and millennia, it hinted at a universal human intuition about sacred sound. Modern science is finally catching up to what ancient builders knew instinctively, that vibration isn't just physics. It's the unseen thread connecting ritual, psychology, and the very stones we once thought mute. As researchers keep listening, the past keeps speaking, in frequencies we're only beginning to hear. The ancients didn't just build with stone, they built with sound, crafting spaces that could heal, unite, and awaken the spirit. Today, as we grapple with the isolating hum of modern life, their acoustic wisdom is more relevant than ever. Take concert halls. Architects now study places like Epidaurus and the Alhambra to design spaces where every seat feels intimate, even in a crowd of thousands. The whisper-quiet precision of Berlin's Pierre Boulez Saal, for instance, mirrors the sonic clarity of Greek theaters, proving that 2,000-year-old principles still outperform digital sound systems. But it's not just about music. Hospitals are adopting resonant frequencies based on Byzantine chant to reduce patient stress, while open-plan offices experiment with Maya-inspired sound diffusion to combat the fatigue of constant noise. The past isn't just echoing, it's guiding. Consider how ancient acoustic design fostered community. Viking longhouses turned stories into shared experiences, their timber frames binding listeners together through vibration. Now, urban planners look to these models to combat the loneliness epidemic, designing public squares where conversations ripple naturally, like in Rome's baths of Caracalla. In Copenhagen's Superkeilen Park, curved walls inspired by Islamic wind catchers create pockets where strangers' voices blend effortlessly, fostering spontaneous connection. Even virtual spaces borrow these ideas. Meditation apps use the resonant tones of Tibetan singing bowls, digitally recreating the brainwave slowing effects of Newgrange's chambers. What the ancients knew instinctively, that sound shapes social bonds, we're now rediscovering through neuroscience. Perhaps most urgently, their acoustic mastery speaks to sustainability. The Badgers of Persia cooled cities without electricity, their wind-driven harmonies a blueprint for passive soundscaping. Modern architects mimic these designs, creating towers where breezes not only regulate temperature but also generate ambient soundscapes to mask urban noise. Meanwhile, acoustic ecologists partner with indigenous communities to preserve sound-rich environments, learning how the Aboriginal songlines or Native American drum circles once mapped landscapes through vibration. In an era of climate crisis, these time-tested solutions remind us that technology doesn't always mean complexity. Sometimes, it means listening to the whispers of stone and wind. The deepest lesson lies in mental health. Monasteries like Mont Saint Michel used reverberation to induce meditative states, a principle now applied in sound therapy for PTSD and anxiety. Researchers at Stanford have even identified sacred resonance frequencies in Gregorian chant that mirror the brainwaves of deep relaxation, frequencies the monks stumbled upon centuries ago through trial and error. From the resonant chambers of Malta to the humming walls of Machu Picchu, ancient spaces were tuning forks for the mind, attuning human consciousness to rhythms we're only now measuring with EEGs. This isn't nostalgia, it's necessity. As screens dominate our attention and cities drown in noise pollution, the past offers a corrective, spaces designed not just for efficiency but for awe. The Maya didn't need decibel meters to know that a Quetzal's cry could uplift a crowd. The builders of charters didn't require algorithms to calculate how long an echo should linger to stir devotion. They understood something we're relearning. Sound isn't background. It's the invisible architecture of human experience, shaping how we think, feel, and connect. The stones of the past aren't silent. They're waiting for us to hear what they've known all along. The echoes of ancient monuments remind us that sound is more than noise. It's a tool of wonder, control, and connection. These structures weren't just built, they were tuned like instruments to play the songs of power and belief. From the whispering galleries of Gol Gum as to the thunderous resonance of Newgrange, every curve of stone, every calculated angle, was a deliberate stroke in a masterpiece we're only beginning to understand. The ancients didn't just want us to see their world, they wanted us to feel it, through vibrations that stirred the soul, through echoes that blurred the line between the human and the divine. Think about what this means for us today. In a world drowned in digital noise where earbuds and screens isolate us, these ancient spaces offer a different blueprint. They remind us that sound can be a bridge, not a barrier, a force that binds communities, shapes emotions, and even alters consciousness. The Viking longhouse didn't just amplify sagas, it wrapped listeners in a shared experience, turning stories into something visceral. The monks of Mont Saint Michel didn't just chant, they let the architecture lift their voices, transforming prayer into a physical presence. These weren't accidents. They were invitations to listen deeper, to connect more fully, to remember that we're part of something larger than ourselves. And yet, there's a warning here too. The same acoustics that uplifted could also manipulate. The Oracle of Delphi's distorted prophecies, the sonic intimidation of Egyptian pyramids, the coded drumbeats of Great Zimbabwe, all reveal how easily sound can become a tool of control. In an age of algorithmically tailored soundscapes and whispered disinformation, the past whispers a caution. Sound shapes reality. Whoever tunes the space tunes the mind. But here's the hopeful part. We're finally listening. Scientists armed with LiDAR and 3D modeling are decoding what the builders knew instinctively. Architects are borrowing from the Alhambra's tiles and the Badger's wind songs to design spaces that heal rather than overwhelm. Even virtual reality now experiments with resonant frequencies to recreate the awe of standing in Chartres Cathedral or the Hypogeum. The ancients may not have had our tools, but they had something we're rediscovering: a reverence for sound's power to transform. So the next time you step into a space that feels different, whether it's a grand cathedral or a quiet forest, pause. Listen. The best monuments don't just stand against time. They speak across it, and if you listen closely, you might just hear an echo of what they've been trying to tell us all along. That sound isn't just something we hear. It's something we live in, a hidden dimension of human experience waiting to be explored. Now it's your turn. Which ancient acoustic marvel leaves you breathless? The Quetzal's cry trapped in El Castillo's stones, the bone-deep hum of Malta's Hypogeum. Drop your favorites in the comments, and if you've ever felt a space speak to you, share that too. Don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into history's unsung harmonies, because the past isn't silent, it's just waiting for the right listener.